Hello and welcome in. This is a special live edition of the FutureSox podcast, I guess. Welcome, James. How are you?
I'm good, sir. This is different, but we got to be ready. So,
Yeah, we're kind of going through a quasi live stream practice event here because we're looking forward to the draft on Sunday night, especially because the Chicago White Sox selected pick number 15. So we're going to be hosting a live draft show on this platform, and we want to make sure everything goes well. So that's what we're doing tonight, and we also want to hang out with everyone. We want to hang out with you, the White Sox fan, and talk about some things. So, James, few things that we have to get to. I want to be able to promote this link. Looks like we're live on the Sox Machine YouTube channel, so welcome if you're listening there. And also, we plan to post this probably on the weekend. So just bear with us if you're listening in the future. But today we're live and we're having some fun, and we want to hear from you as well. So, James, couple things that we can talk about today. Noah Schultz, awesome. Colson Montgomery in Winston Salem after he got the nod from the Arizona Complex League. We'll get it more in depth there. Also, the draft. I mean, the draft is the story coming up this weekend. The White Sox. I don't know how much of Rick Hahn you heard, but that was pretty dejecting. And I think the White Sox are going to be making some moves to hopefully prepare themselves for the future by the August 1st trade deadline. So a lot to get to. Wherever you want to start, how about we react a little bit to Rick Hahn and his press conference the other day? What were some of your thoughts there, James?
well, I mean, I guess I was just kind of surprised that people were surprised. Like this is what Rickon is at this point. He's not gonna totally abandon ship yet because, I mean, look, they could win five in a row, right? Like they're not going to. I think we all kind of know that, but he has to kind of express confidence in the players that are in that room and the coaching staff that he assembled. But I mean, I don't know. Like I think that guy sounded like a guy that is resigned to the fact that they're going to be selling. I mean, didn't it to you? Didn't he sound like? I mean, it sounds like as soon as this draft is over on Tuesday, they're back at it on the weekend, and their schedule coming is tough. I think they're selling within, what, like maybe it goes up until like the August 1st deadline or whatever. But I think trade rumors start coming pretty hot and heavy. This is a team that's selling. I mean, 13 under 500, you're seven back of both teams. It's over. He sounded like a guy that kind of knows that too.
Yeah, and he was, I mean, doing his best to paint a picture out. He wanted to eliminate the 7-21 start. Like that was, I mean, you just can't do it. But even so, you're about a game over 500, if that, since. And he tried to paint a picture since May. They had the best record in the division, even though it was about a game over 500. So you're right. As a general manager, especially this organization for this organization as a general manager, it's not easy to paint a happy facade in what we're seeing out in the field because there's a lot of James going into this year, and I don't want to make this all about the big league White Sox and the disappointment that we're feeling right now, but as we were anticipating the roster and projecting how they would perform this year, we looked at the 40 man and said, okay, this team better stay healthy because there's not a lot of help in AAA. And now we're seeing them exhaust their resources in AAA. Unfortunately, Davis Martin, that was a huge hit. But in that regard, Davis Martin shouldn't hurt you so much to the point where you're scrapping for guys like Tuki Toussaint, and they just signed another right-handed pitcher off the waiver wire the other day. Things are happening, but I think essentially the White Sox went in and said, okay, we have to stay healthy and be ready for, I guess, 40 plus 15, right? I guess we could have our 40 man and then as well as an extra 15 players that we can count on to be respectable big league representatives. But that's just not how Major League Baseball teams operate. And that's not how seasons go because they're fighting so many injuries right now that they can't overcome it. And when you look at the AAA depth, we've seen it. It's not good enough. And it goes back to those, especially for those who are listening now and are fans of the Sox Machine and Future Sox podcasts. We've been talking about preparing for what's to come, and that's in 2024 and 2025, of course. I say this all the time, James. I don't know about you and everything that I just went through about the lack of depth in AAA. It just seems like the White Sox want to invest internally and make sure that their options that they're developing are what their maybe major league roster will be in the future, as well as safe spending in the immediate sense. I don't foresee them spending, dishing out some cash. I'd love for them to sign Giolito, but to me, it just seems like they're going internal.
It does, which is like an issue, right? Because we've kind of talked about the lack of upper minors pitching depth on this podcast, and obviously, I think like I've been a fan of what they've done in the draft like the last couple of years. I think they've added pitching that that I kind of like, and we'll get to Noah Schultz here. But I mean, that's like a while from now. Like they don't have anybody particularly close, so looking at next year, I mean, it just like kind of paints an ugly picture where you're going to have to go into the free agent market for multiple starters unless you receive starters for next year's rotation in upcoming trades that you're going to make. Right. And it's why, like, what I'm about to say, like, it has been unpopular, like on Twitter and everywhere else. But I mean, like at this deadline, like you should really see what you can get for Dylan Cease. And I know people don't want to hear that, but like as of right now, it's Dylan Cease and Michael Kopech in the 2024 rotation. You need 3 starters, plus you don't have any of those other things that you kind of talked about, right? Starters 6, 7, 8, and 9. You don't have any of that. Like, how are you going to win next year? And if you're not going to win next year, then you should very much consider maximizing Dylan Cease right now, getting the most that you can for him, and just deciding that 2024 probably isn't going to be good enough. Because the alternative to that is you keep Dylan Cease. It's similar to what we've seen. You win 74 games with him. Then you're looking to trade 1 year of Dylan Cease instead of 2.5 years of Dylan Cease. And, you get less than you would probably get now. So, yeah, I mean, they have really tough questions that they have to answer. I don't know which way they're going to go, but they definitely do not have enough pitching to get through a season, if you're like anticipating trying to win something.
Yeah, Ian, appreciate you checking in. Ian Eskridge, a big fan. We're a big fan of his work, and all those listening. Ron, thanks so much for checking in. Appreciate all the comments. Yeah, James, like when you think about specifically the future of the rotation, you move on from Cease and get what you think you can get from them, right? Ian makes a great point. Sean Burke, the lack of success there does hurt the depth. What are some of the names that you think coming up in next year's class of, I guess, candidates to pitch in AAA? I mean, when it comes to those young arms, if you're moving on from Cease, I'm hoping you get a big league ready talent, one of the top prospects in a farm system. I just, what's the plan if you move on from a guy like him? What's the plan if you do commit to trade Giolito and Tim Anderson? Because I know we can't solve it all right now, but there's nothing, and we need time to watch these kids develop still.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like, Ian's point is a good one. Like, Burke, like, I thought was going to struggle at Charlotte, and we were going to have to, like, ignore some numbers a little bit. But, like, the fact that he's not even pitching is a big problem. Like, because he needs these innings. We've talked about Christian Mena. I think the stats aren't great, but he's been okay. And it's in the AA Southern League. So I think he's, like, an option for next year. I think Matthew Thompson, has obviously been off and on for a long time. But I mean, like, look, I bet they give him a shot, like, at some point fairly soon. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Matt Thompson in the second half this year, just because they have to make a Rule 5 decision on him. So, like, what do what are you going to do there? I mean, like, eventually here, there's going to be pitchers in Charlotte, because there's pitchers that we've all been following in Winston and Birmingham, and those guys are going to have to, like, get there. I think, like, right now, Chase Selesky's in Charlotte. Not a prospect, obviously, but, somebody that can help. And I just think it's like, it's so hard to pitch there that it's just really tough to build pitching depth. And then you get a guy like AJ Alexi, right, who just got totally bombed like all season and then, like, got released. I mean, those are the types of guys that you get there, but, like, you can't get through a season with those types of guys. So obviously, like we've seen, like, Jonathan Cannon's going to pitch in the Futures game. Like, we all kind of know what Jonathan Cannon is. I think he's going to pitch in the big leagues. He's probably a number 4, and there's really no reason to leave him in Winston that long. I think he goes to Birmingham next year, and then it's probably like the big leagues once they think he has whatever he needs cleaned up. So, like, there are options, but there's not top of the rotation options. So,
Mhm.
you ask like what the plan is if you get rid of a guy like Dylan Cease. I would counter with like, what is the plan with a guy like Dylan Cease? Like you're just like not good enough. So, like it was kind of, like the Bulls earlier this year, Mike, where they kind of said that like they were trying to buy at the trade deadline, but everybody else was buying too. And it's
Mhm.
like, well, yeah, so then you should sell. That's kind of how I feel about the White Sox right now. There's not a ton of sellers. Obviously, the Mets and Padres could enter that marketplace. But if you're the White Sox, I mean, you should be at least fielding calls, right? They shouldn't just trade Dylan Cease. But I mean, if the Orioles want to give you three names of, position player excess talent that they have that a lot of us on here right now really like, I mean, it's kind of something that I think you need to consider. I saw the question about Giolito, Ron. Like, I'm not sure. Like, I think I was saying, like, I think you could probably get a back end top 100 guy for Giolito, but I don't even necessarily know that like you want a top 100. I think, you want a guy, that you think is going to be able to help you that maybe isn't on a top 100 that will be, right? Like I'd love for once for the White Sox to go identify two guys on the rise that like they get into this system and then, oh, look, like now they're top 100 guys. But I mean, he should bring back something pretty good, I would think. Like I know it's a rental, but there's just not that many guys on the market. Like he's going to be one of the top starters available. And basically what I've been saying is you have to get better than the 70th pick in the 2024 draft because that's what you would get, if you gave him the qualifying offer. So even if it's not like this home run package that people are expecting, as long as it's better than just like the comp pick next year, I think it's kind of something you probably have to pull the trigger on.
I love the comp. Everybody's buying, So the White Sox, I think you asked a question about Cease. What do you do with him? I'd rather have him than not have him. It depends, I guess, on the timeline and what they're willing to spend. We had a good conversation with Josh Nelson. Congratulations to have tip to him for getting married officially. That was a lot of fun the other day. I just wonder how much, and I definitely recommend you go back and listen. If you're not a subscriber to the Future Sox podcast, go check that out wherever you get your podcast. We had a conversation with him, and he talked about maybe some of the budgetary restrictions related to broadcast feeds and how much the White Sox organization are taking into account, like those marginal things outside of the roster spending. So we know how it is, and who I don't know how long Jerry Reinsdorf wants to be the owner of the White Sox, to be honest with you. And I know it's a complicated thing because of the way it's because it's shareholders and there's a certain amount of percentages owned within the White Sox among those shareholders. So it's not easy for the White Sox to just get up and sell, right? So it's just one of those things where if you think the White Sox are going to sell, you may want to take a step back and realize that this is going to be like one of the more businessy long-term processes that I don't know will take a lot longer than we anticipate. Because it's not as simple as selling to Cohen, right, of the Mets. But I would rather have Dylan Cease than without him. I think over the next 2 years, I think he's a catalyst. A lot of innings under his belt. Outside of that, what's the plan with Garrett Crochet, guys? I know the health issues isn't there. It's just been a huge debacle across this season. I'm wondering what the process is in terms of scouting. What are they prioritizing in this upcoming draft and in the offseason? There's a lot of things going on in my head as it relates to the future of the White Sox. If you have any more, please, I see your questions as well in the chat. Please bring them on because this is essentially what we're doing on Sunday for the draft, and we're going to be reacting to picks, and we're having guests everywhere. I'm really looking forward to the draft class because if you infuse more talent to this farm system, that's the bottom 10, and James, you sent a nice little piece from Kylie McDaniel kind of breaking down the Chicago White Sox farm system. It's not very good. They're still considered one of the worst in the league, although those familiar with the White Sox farm system know that talent really does reside in the single A, advanced A ranks right now and scattered in double A. So I want to see what they do if they go prep, if they go college. I think there's a lot that can happen in the top 10 that may influence the White Sox pick at 15. And that's where I think we're standing right now as Sox fans, anticipating the next 2 years of development within the White Sox organization. And the question that I have too is, what are the big league coaching staff like? What are some of the things that the coaching staff is doing at the big league level that's allowing these young players to adjust to the major leagues, as well as overcome deficiencies or some of the things that you need to have, like a big league plate approach, right? When it comes to Oscar Colas, like that kind of relates there. So a lot of questions that I have. This is a first year manager with some people that are returning from previous regimes in the White Sox organization, as well as his own people from other organizations. There's just a lot going on right now, and it seems very, very clearly to me that the White Sox are going to sell. How does that, as a fan, those who are listening and in this chat, how does that make you feel if the White Sox do commit to selling? Because I want to get a feel of where the White Sox fan base is. I know how they feel about Tim Anderson right now, at least most of them, but Andrew Vaughn is a big disappointment. Jake Berger's not an everyday third baseman. You don't have Tim Anderson next year. Who's going to play shortstop? I just have a lot of questions. So, I mean, please fire away in the comment section. Let's kind of get this train back on its tracks, because I want to go through some of the things that we had planned to talk about. James did a really great piece previewing the White Sox draft specifically, but also in general, the Major League Baseball draft in 2023. He detailed all of the value when it comes to allotted picks, all the slot value, I should say. And it's interesting when you look at it all and he breaks down all the numbers, because those familiar with the draft, that every pick costs a certain slot, and you can go over, you can go under, and that does really determine the pathway for some of these organizations and how they pick their players. It's not best player available all the time. It's, hey, we can get this guy at under slot, and then in the second round, we're targeting a player that we can overspend and convince him to sign if he's prepped. It's just one example. So as we preview the 2023 Major League Baseball draft, it's coming up on Sunday. We did it with Josh Nelson. Those listening, I'm sure you've heard the FutureSox podcast. We broke it down with Burt Granger and so many others. But I want to get James' opinion, because James has been in and around those who are familiar with the comings and goings of the news that are going around with the Major League Baseball draft. So, James, please take it away. I want to hear what you believe could happen at 15, and say, like, Pittsburgh doesn't go Dylan Cruz. Is that a thing? Like, fill us in.
Like, one of the things that I'm most confident about is that Pittsburgh's not going to go with Dylan Cruz. Now, I don't know who they're going to pick. I just don't really think that it's going to be him. I just kind of think, with Boris representing him, 9.7 million is that slot value, like we've kind of talked about. I don't think he's getting that. I don't think anybody's getting that. But like, when you deal with a Scott Boris, like, I kind of feel like if you offer Dylan Cruz 9.2, like, they'll eventually take it. But it kind of hamstrings you for the rest of your draft, like not knowing exactly what you can spend. So my thing is, like, at this point, like, if it's Skeens for 9 million or 9.1, like, nobody should be surprised. But like, the two scenarios that I find the most interesting, Wyatt Langford is a guy who's very similar, I think, to Cruz. I don't really see a huge difference there. Like, you could probably get Wyatt Langford for $8.5 million. You pocket the other 1.2, you push a player down to 42, like we've kind of talked about, not to get too much into it, but it's something the Pirates have done before. And then the other thing is Max Clark. So I think there's a very realistic scenario that Max Clark falls all the way to like 7 with the Reds if he doesn't go number 1. So, like, if you're Max Clark, like, you might take 7 million or 7.5 million to go number 1 in this draft. I mean, that's like huge savings for the Pirates. Not that that's what they'll prioritize. I just kind of think those are the options. I think it'll come into focus here, like, over the next 4 days. I heard Jim Callis on with Josh Nelson. He kind of said he doesn't think we'll know until 5 minutes before the pick is made, which might be true. But So, I think there's 3 names there. I'd be pretty surprised if it was Cruz at this point. And then if it's not Skeens, like, I kind of feel like Dylan Cruz might fall to Detroit. So, but then after that, who knows? Like after that, it's a complete crapshoot. It's a good class, like we've talked about, but there's a lot of teams that are data teams in the top 10 that might just take college bats or whatever. So, like, I feel like the White Sox are a true wild card. It's why I wanted to write the piece the way that I wrote it, because, like, I think there's guys we've heard about, right? Like they brought a bunch of people to that Fayetteville regional where Braden Taylor of TCU was, and Chase Davis, the outfielder from Arizona. And we've heard a lot about Yohandy Morales. But I mean, like, there's a chance somebody falls to them at 15 that they just kind of have to take. And I've been talking about hitters this whole time, right? Like, everybody has. We've said, oh, the White Sox are going to take a bat. But if Chase Dollander of Tennessee's on the board at 15, I think 15 is where, his fall ends, because I think they would take Chase Dollander, and then the White Sox would take pitching again. So I just think there's kind of a lot of options. We're going to talk about this Sunday, obviously, as it unfolds. But what happens at 1, I feel like kind of kicks everything off. So, Ian, I see, what your comment there. I don't think they will take Max Clark. I don't think they're going to take a high school hitter because of their model. Their model, all the rumors are basically with the Twins that Jacob Gonzalez, Kyle Teal, somebody along those lines. And then I think the other high school bat, Walker Jenkins, might go to 4 with Texas, because Texas doesn't have much money, but they've been a Boris team lately. So I could see him at 4. But that's why I said that I thought Max Clark would fall a little bit. Like, if he doesn't go 1, I'm not sure what the destination is in the top 5. So that's just like one interesting thing to note, I guess.
If you can tell, if you're watching on YouTube, on the Sox Machine YouTube page, and on Twitter, you can see our lovely faces. I figured it out. That's what I was trying to do for the first 20 minutes of this episode. So that's awesome. And I'm glad I was able to figure that out ahead of Sunday, because it's a big deal. We want to be able to talk to you, and you can see us now. So that's really cool. I'm looking so much forward to potentially getting an arm in the organization again, because I love watching Noah Schultz. I loved covering the start of Garrett Crochet's professional career. That was so much fun. I'm just a big fan of pitching, and I saw what you had to say earlier, Ian, about Drew Dahlquist. Man, there's a lot of mechanical things going on there, and unfortunately, the stuff, like, he could throw multiple pitches, but the stuff can't be made for strikes. And when I noticed something interesting about, I don't know if you saw this too, Ian, but this is something that I caught when he was first put into, I think, professional competition. So I guess in Arizona, I was watching clips of Andrew Dahlquist's rotation, and he was falling so heavily towards first base. And this season, if you look at some clips, if you go from like 2019 season, 2020 season, well, I guess not 2020, but 2021 and 2019, there was a dramatic fall off the mound towards first base in Dahlquist mechanics. Now it's a little bit more downhill. And speaking of mechanics, something that I saw in Peyton Paulette's case, Paulette, first year professional after Tommy John, it looks like he's coming more downhill. And it's something that I noticed like right away when they drafted him, when he was working by himself, just independently in like a indoor facility. He would stop his front side as he delivered. So when he finished, his torso was more or less straight up and down facing the catcher. And I just felt like it prevents you from getting so much more on your velocity, on your follow through. You know what I mean? And now, look, watching Peyton Paulette finish, looks like he's going more towards home plate downhill. And I like to see those noticeable changes, like what we saw in Dylan Cease's mechanics and what we saw in Lucas Giolito's mechanics in real time. Similar to Andrew Vaughn's batting mechanics, like the beginning of this season, we saw him take more of an approach with his hands held up way higher. Just a very disappointing season. And it all goes back to what James is talking about, is the significance of the draft class. And maybe they do get a Chase Dollander. I would be ecstatic if that happens. Like, that's one of those things where last season, or a couple of years ago, when we were hoping that Colson Montgomery, I should say, was fall to the White Sox when he did, and they got him. And now he's their top prospect, a top 100, top 30 prospect in all of baseball. So if things fall the White Sox way, Chase Dollander goes there, give me that. I'm excited. I'm excited also, too, for Matt Shaw, possibly, because I want to see a regular second baseman. I've been saying this on the Future Sox podcast. I don't know if he's going to get there, but I mean, what do you think, James? Is Matt Shaw a possibility?
I think so. If he's there, I just don't know if he's going to be there. There's a lot of rumors with him in Miami at 10, but I mean, like these college guys, like you just never know, right? Like everybody's board is different. I saw a question from Matt asking my dream scenario. It's weird. I don't know that I necessarily have one this year. I guess for me, I would prefer they take one of the prep guys. Like I would be happy with Hauk. I'd be happy with Namala. I'd be happy with a guy that I think has been super undersold in Aiden Miller. Like all the intel that I've heard and others I've talked to with the White Sox, it just seems like they really want to save a little bit of money in the first round if they can with like one of their college targets. So then they can attack prep pitching again, like in rounds 2 and 3 and 4. And, they have other targets there. So, like, look, I mean, is there a guy where they would just kind of like eschew that plan and take them? Maybe. Like, I don't know that. Like, maybe they love Colin Houck. And he doesn't go to Arizona like it's widely rumored he's there at 15. They take him, they pay him slot. Like that would be great. I'd be totally fine with that. So I don't know. I'd always prefer a prep guy for anybody that's listened to the Future Sox podcast. Obviously, I don't think there's a college starter to take unless Dollander falls. So, I would expect a college position player or a prep position player. It seems like college 3 days out, but who really knows? I mean, they're a wild card. Mike Shirley could do anything at this point. The one thing I will say that we don't really know the answer to, it could go back to my dream center. I hope they let Mike Shirley make this pick. Like, I really hope that he's the one like choosing this player because I firmly believe he's the best scout in the draft room. So, it happens sometimes where general manager will like run a college pitcher up the board or something because they need one. That's not really a case this year because there's nobody on the board, which could help them. And they definitely haven't operated that way the last 2 years, as Ian kind of alluded to. And I actually think like the Garrett Crochet pick is like a super high upside pick too. Like it's not Mike Shirley's fault that they like rushed him to the big leagues and put him in the bullpen right away and then hired Tony La Russa. I mean, this was like not the development plan for Garrett Crochet when he was drafted, which, is another issue that like the org isn't on the same page that we don't really have time to get into tonight. But obviously, that's kind of what we're dealing with. So if it's Mike Shirley, I'm fairly confident that, we could at least talk ourselves into like whoever they pick.
When it comes to upside picks, I love that Mike Shirley's aggressive and not being afraid of risk, like you were talking about in your article, James. Definitely go to FutureSox.com, read James' preview on the draft because he discusses so many little intricacies of what the White Sox are working with right now. And like you said, in the second, maybe third round, if they're focusing on prep pitching, it's not a strategy that I'm opposed to. I'm a fan of developing young arms. Developing young bats, I think that's a challenge. Not saying that young arms, isn't, but I think you can get away with missing your first couple of years as a pitcher and then developing into something great later on. I just feel like you can build on failure better as a pitcher sometimes. I don't know if you guys agree with that or not. I could be completely stupid and wrong. You can tell me that. It's cool. Appreciate everybody tuning in tonight and giving us their opinions. I want to bring in Sleepy Harold, our guy Steve Hasman, because Sleepy's been a key cog in in what we do in the machine that is Future Sox, now part of Sox Machine. Sleepy's been well this year. He does trending on the farm, so every Monday or Tuesday you'll see that a weekly report. It's updates on prospects in farm system that are going up and down in their performances throughout the year. And Sleepy not only does that weekly, but contributes so much to what we do at Future Sox, which is, either contributing to articles that we need to get finished or providing opinion or information, keeping dialogue going. So we love Sleepy and we welcome him to the broadcast here. So we want to add Sleepy to the stream. There he is. How you doing, Sleepy? Welcome in. How you feeling, man? I heard you were sick.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I'm all right. A bit under the weather. Both kids we're sick, and by the transitive property of parenting, both my wife and I are now sick. So we're getting there. We're past the worst part at this point, just a little nasally, but could be worse.
The worst part is now when you give it back to your kids and then they give it back to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cycle, but
Yeah.
it's not as bad as it was like a month or two ago when he was puking for a week. So I'll take this.
Sleepy, I love the mustache, and I also love the Birmingham Barons cap that you're sporting as well. I know your guy, Jose Rodriguez, is performing there, and he got the call up to the big league club. I wanted to ask you about what you thought of his big league experience, as well as the decision to send him back to Birmingham now.
Yeah, how did he look pinch running?
Yeah, it was cool. He ran with a lot of energy. Scored, like he looked excited. I mean, the whole handling of the situation, it just kind of screams White Sox with again, I'm happy for him. He's on the 40-man, gets promoted, gets a week's worth of big league pay, and hey, man, cool. That's awesome. Not many people ever get to say they were in the majors for your Moonlight Graham, whatever moment. So and I understand why they did it, given at the time, Lenyn Sosa was on the IL and they needed an infielder, and he's on the 40-man. So, yeah, it makes sense. I just wished he would have played, once or twice. Because to me, I understand, defaulting to the 29-year-old below average AAA, 4A player, getting all the starts over an exciting prospect that had been hitting well, for the last month and went down and continued to still hit well. He homered today too. So, I would have liked to see him play. I understand why they did it. I just think there's enough fat still probably on the 40-man. They could have, if they wanted somebody to ride the bench, call up Gilbert, call up Eric Gonzalez, call up some other warm body that you don't have to take a guy out from a week of development to, just have him sit there and learn the major league experience or whatever.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. I think the White Sox were in a tough position, and it's easy to think some of these guys on the 40-man can just be, dispersed, which they kind of have been. They've been making moves to clean up the 40-man. I just think that, they did it, like you said, they did it with Lenyn last season, and I'm thinking of the way it relates to Jose Rodriguez this year. I don't know if it's the exact same. I feel like Jose got a pretty late start this year, struggled in Birmingham, then turned it on, got called up, like you said, because he was on the 40-man roster. And I feel like the White Sox plan altogether was just to make sure that the roster was filled, the active roster was filled. And that, like you said, you're going through the routine of being a big leaguer for the first time. It would have been nice to see him get into a game. We could just leave it at that. So, Sleepy, as we continue this, I want to get your take on the draft as well. James was talking about Chase Dollander. I don't know if you have anybody in mind that you'd love to see fall potentially at 15, or if you have a position group, maybe it's prep, college, what have you. Your feeling on what the White Sox should do and what you want them to do.
Yeah. So, in my opinion, what they should do. Well, obviously we know because we check into it a lot. The system can use help everywhere. So whichever direction they go, it should help out. To me, I think a bat, because after Colson, arguably Ramos, there's not really an impact bat that would jump out to you. Jacob Burke looks good. Tim Elko's got power, but it's that profile of first base, right, older guy who strikes out. There's not really an impact bat. So I would like to see them go bat with the first pick. I would lean prep up the middle talent, just because, again, that's a demographic the Sox don't have a lot of depth in. And up the middle talent. Like I want to say it's like the Bill James defensive spectrum or something along those lines where, you know, you take guys up the middle and then they can always go out rather than like you take a corner and they don't really have anywhere else to go type deal. I just think it, you know, for what they could use, and then given the uncertainty surrounding whatever direction this team is going to go, or whomever is going to be making the decisions on where this team is going, like if it's Rick, if Kenny, if it's anyone else, you know, Chris Getz, future GM, like, you know, who knows? Yeah. Like, who knows who's going to be making decisions or calls. I just think, like, you know, kind of similar to what even you touched on with like prep arms, like, you know, they have time to kind of, if they struggle right away, like they have time to kind of, you know, develop and work on things and like grow into it, rather than on like the college side where, you know, if you don't kind of perform right away, it's like, oh, did we bust this? Like, is this, you know, is this not working out the way that we thought? So, I mean, for me, like, I would love to see, you know, like James mentioned, you know, Namala or Houck if he slides, Walker Martin, you know, just, I think like an up the middle type. I know Aiden Miller's third base, but, you know, an up the middle type would be my preference and on the prep side. But I want to bat, like, because this team needs hitting. We've seen even this year with the Major League Club, like the pitching has been, for the most part, I mean, there are blips and hiccups, but the pitching has been pretty decent. Starting pitching, there's been, you know, bullpen issues, but bullpens are volatile. Just the hitting, like, I mean, they couldn't, at times they can't hit their way out of a wet paper bag. So I think they need to get greater depth with the lineup, with the bats. And, you know, even if it's a shortstop who eventually moves to second, you know, in favor of Colson or whatever. Like, I think having more bats, at least a top bat in the system, if they want to go pitching after, they need it. So, like, cool, but give me a bat first.
So, Sleepy, one of the things that kind of snuck up on me that I noticed, you know, when you're trending on the farm piece is like Brian Ramos is like successful at Birmingham so far. I mean, it's like 4 homers, I think, only, but he hasn't played that long. I mean, he continues to put up the numbers he's putting up at Birmingham. He's 21. Like, I don't know if it's necessary for him to see Charlotte this year, but, you know, I do know, like, Colson Montgomery is playing in the Arizona Fall League this year. My guess is that Brian Ramos goes as well, just because of the missed time. You know, as a guy that's already on the 40-man, I guess just like how realistic, I guess, is it that, I mean, I think we probably see Brian Ramos next year, I would think. And, you know, like in the comments over here, there's lots of questions about trade talk and stuff that we'll get to. And, you know, I expect Yohan Moncada to be on this team next year just because of how much money he makes and, you know, that. But, I mean, Brian Ramos is in AA hitting. If he continues hitting in the Southern League, I mean, he's going to be in the big league soon because all these guys go to Charlotte and hit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and that's been I guess the encouraging part, like with Ramos, is like, you know, he had his mysterious injury that they weren't quite mum about for however long. Same thing with Colson, and I mean, even to a point with Noah Schultz. But Ramos came back, you know, again, had a bit of rust, which isn't unexpected after the long layoff, but from the games that I've been watching, and even from the clips, you know, from White Sox Daily, from Ian and Danny, like, he's still, he hits the ball, like that ball flies. So like, he's just been like, even this last week, I mean, he had, you know, the power wasn't there this last week, but it was still, you know, 800 plus OPS. Like, he's just been doing that, performing. The power's showing up. So like, it's encouraging. And like you said, you know, Charlotte's a bandbox. So like, he definitely, I would think, and this is too, if they have the continuing second base woes, maybe they give it more run if it is next season, you know, spring training, or if they drop him into Charlotte a little bit. maybe they give him more run at second to see like, all right, is this he's gotten good reports there before, and he's mostly been playing. I don't know if he's gotten any action this year in Birmingham, at least at second, but maybe that becomes like a way to just sneak him in and try him out there if Jose Rodriguez isn't running away with it, or Lenin isn't, or whatever other circumstance. It's just another avenue to fill that position internally, and with his bat and his bat at the Keystone would be a pretty exciting development if it worked out that way.
Well, I'm curious to see what they do, just like in the second half here, because like before you got on, we were talking about trades. It seems like sellers, I think, to most of us here that are kind of talking. But I don't know if it was a question, but it was at least a comment from Ian. So Colson Montgomery is not staying at Winston-Salem long, from what I've been told. I think he'll be in Birmingham next week, whenever their first game is, Tuesday. So I think he'll be in Double-A. So, I don't know this, but my guess is that's when Jose Rodriguez goes to Charlotte, because I don't know why you would keep him in Birmingham with Colson there. So, I have no reason to think that he won't do exactly what Sosa's doing in Charlotte, So, you're going to have two middle infielders in Charlotte that are going to put up 20 to 25 homer seasons, in the minors. Now, we saw 103 big league at bats for Sosa, and it was underwhelming, right? But it's 103 big league at bats. If you're going to be bad, I think you can argue that maybe those guys, one of them at least should probably be playing second for the White Sox. If you want to have the other one in Charlotte, fine. But, at least playing in the upper minors, because then from what I've initially heard here about Colson, this might not be that long. And I've heard from people, that think, 2025, because he was hurt. He looks awesome the last 2 days.
Yeah.
You have the Kylie McDaniels and Keith Laws of the world, dropping the superstar word. These guys just come quick, right? And if Colson Montgomery goes to Birmingham, kind of does what he's done at Winston, and then he's one of the better players in the Arizona Fall League, he's going to be a top 15 prospect coming into next season, regardless of whether it's Birmingham or Charlotte. We're going to see this guy next year. I just kind of, feel like it. And Mike, you can, if you disagree on the timeline, feel free. I just, this is the team that we root for. If this guy stays this good, we are going to see him soon. I think anyways.
So related to Montgomery, I think it's really fascinating, because his case at 19 years old, when they drafted him, the first thing that evaluators said about Montgomery was his plate approach, the discipline, the fact that he can identify pitches and how pitchers are attacking him, and how he makes adjustments mid-at-bat throughout games, and how he can recognize a major league strike zone, a professional strike zone. That's step one. So if you're inherently there, if you have that quality inherently, I should say, then, man, that's a huge hurdle that you don't have to overcome. I feel the same way about Andrew Vaughn, and I bring him up a lot. He's making me really sad, guys. Okay, if you follow me, you know that I'm a huge Andrew Vaughn fan. But Andrew Vaughn is the guy in the draft class that was saying elite eye. The skill set reminded me of the way Chris Bryant was coming out of the draft in terms of his plate approach and discipline. Colson Montgomery is on par with those types of names in terms of that quality. So first things first, that's awesome. Then we saw it in action, and we saw evaluators also recognize that he had gap-to-gap power. So I'm saying, this is really cool. And he's making contact at a really proficient rate, I'm saying, at this point. Then he adds size. I know he got the late start this year, but you're hearing about the size that he put on while also maintaining the leverage in his core and his lower half to be able to play shortstop at an efficient level. So we're saying, wow, this is a guy who's ahead of his time with his plate approach. This guy can stay balanced at the shortstop position. He's got a strong enough arm to play there. The glove is good. So the power is getting there, right? He can go any which way with the power as a shortstop. So all we want to do is let him play. And with James' information, makes all the sense in the world to me. He seems like he's already taken to Winston-Salem at this point, understanding the strike zone there, barreling up baseballs there already. So the challenge is Birmingham. I think he'll be able to take on Birmingham. I guess the anticipation is, James, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is Colson Montgomery will likely play in the Arizona Fall League this year, and I think that shouldn't go to the wayside. I think it's a huge aspect of his timeline, and I'm with you. I think if it's move on from Tim Anderson, get a placeholder for the early part of 2024, Colson Montgomery is your shortstop, because at this point, 2024 is a pipe dream if you believe the White Sox are competing for the division, and I think the organization understands it. So if all this is going to how we're feeling at this point, I would not dismiss the idea that Colson Montgomery is at the big league club and their regular shortstop by this time next year. That's a little aggressive, but maybe even in August, right? I think that timeline is totally fair.
Well, Sleepy, I just don't know if guys like this need to play in Charlotte for that long. So it kind of depends on if he goes to Double-A and does this, right? And even if eventually he moves off shortstop, whatever, I think there are people smarter than me that think he can stay there. I don't think we're going to find that out, but he definitely has enough bat to play third. He's the type of guy that I just kind of feel like Triple-A is a little bit of a waste of time, but we'll see what they want to do.
Oh, Sleepy, real quick. I see Ian's comment about his glove, and I think that's something that I want to see develop at a higher rate when it gets to, or I should say, I want to see it play against a higher pace of competition. So the game gets a little bit quicker in Double-A and Triple-A. And if he's able to handle the pace of play and, the heat coming off the bat, right, and the angles and the first step, then I'll feel really excited, because the questions are, can he stay at shortstop? James just mentioned, Sleepy, the possibility of him playing third base, and the fact that, related to the Charlotte point, we knew Oscar Colas was going to dominate in Charlotte because the competition's just lesser there, and Colas is a big league bat, just not at the big league level at this point, right? He's not developed there. However, he's way too talented for Triple-A. It's just that kind of bridge that they're trying to figure out now. And related to Colson Montgomery, I think that sort of has some merit to it.
Well, I think that's people's fear. Sorry, Sleepy. It's people's fear, I think, with Sosa right now, too. Because, to me, I'm not just buying, a huge AAA sample from Lenny and Sosa. But I am buying the 140 WRC plus, at Birmingham after, that's the place where White Sox prospects have traditionally, went to die. And then that's it, right? This guy put up Luis Robert numbers at Birmingham, and then now he's good at Charlotte. So that's kind of what I've fallen back on. So we'll see, right? But I guess the fear is that he's just always going to be one of these guys that struggles without a ton of playing time in the majors, and then he goes back down and destroys the International League. So hopefully he can put it together in the majors and we can see it, because it's not that dissimilar to what Marcus Semien did, when he was on the White Sox and then they traded him before he got good. And it did take a while. It was a lot of work in Oakland. And I don't know that the White Sox will have that level of patience, and I don't know that they'll need it. I just, I know that, we haven't seen enough with 103 at bats in the big leagues is basically my point.
Yeah. And going back to the Colson aspect, I definitely put more weight into the Birmingham numbers, because as James has mentioned, as everybody else has, Birmingham is just hard for hitters to have success in. We've seen numerous prospects go there and just wilt and fade off into the distance, just right off in the sunset. So what he's able to accomplish or is not able to accomplish will kind of be the true test. And if he succeeds how we project and expect, sure, if you want to send him to Charlotte for a little bit, I guess, yeah, fine. I don't really the whole Colas situation. I don't really see what else you're going to be, unless you're giving them a specific item to work on. Like, I don't really know what, the benefit is versus like sending him to Charlotte for a month or just having him figure it out in the majors, which, like, I mean, the Colas situation was like, they just didn't plan for another outfielder. And when it didn't go great, they went back to playing first baseman in the outfield and Clint Frazier and whoever else until Oscar Colas went back and did whatever they, I guess, asked him to do. And then the power started showing up and they called him right back up. So, like, he started dominating like we expected he would. So, like, that's kind of the thing is, like, I don't really want, like, what do you gain from that except, like, surface time back? It's just kind of like, it's just
let me
weird.
ask you this, Sleepy, and we think we talked about this with Josh Nelson on the last podcast of the FutureSox episode. If you can go back and listen to that, we appreciate it. We drop episodes every Tuesday, by the way. We talked about the rate at which prospects are getting promoted and how long it takes sometimes White Sox evaluators to make that decision to put them to the next level. For example, Jacob Burke in Single A in Kannapolis was way, way, way too good for that level. And it seemed like he was there for a while and he got moved up to Winston-Salem. Terrell Tatum, another example, who's having success in Birmingham in his call-up, which is really cool to see. It took him a minute to get there. And, there's a couple of more examples to that end. And I just wonder what it is that the White Sox are looking for in determining a player is ready to get promoted. Because when it comes to Oscar Colas, I bought into the philosophy behind beginning Colas at the big league level in 2023 because the White Sox are there watching him perform in AAA last season and in the minors last season, and their reason is saying, okay, the only concern that they had at the beginning of the season with Colas is the plate approach, is a professional routine and understanding those types of things. So that kind of was okay, right? They were like, okay, that's something that we wanted to make sure that he was ready. Then he gets into the big leagues and struggles, outside of a couple of successful at-bats early, but overall it was a struggle. The reasons why they kept Oscar Colas down for so long in Charlotte was, according to the White Sox, is the routine, the everyday daily routine. Now, that's one specific example, but I just found that curious that, he spent so much time in Charlotte. They stressed the routine. They were concerned about the routine at the beginning of the season, although because of the roster situation, the commitments they made or lack thereof in the offseason, he had to be there. So that may not relate to the reasons why they're moving other prospects to the next level. I just want to know their evaluation. What are they looking at? Our guy, Jeff Cohen, was asking the question to Cam Seltzer, the hitting coach in Charlotte today. What was it that Oscar Colas was doing well to get him to the next level? And there wasn't a concrete answer. They were talking about his essentially what they said about his routine. But we know that there are analytics there that suggests a player is doing what they're hoping that he does. For example, not to continue the rambling, but Jacob Burke let it slip a little bit to our Jeff Cohen, mentioning that when prospects talk to members of the organization, now I don't know who that is, whether it's Matt Zaleski or whoever, Andy Barkett at this point, if there's a plan for prospects that says we want your expected slugging, we want your exit velocity to look this way consistently over this amount of stretch, then we know you're ready to go to the next level. And that's just a long-winded way of getting there, right? For me to finally get to this point, it's like, what is it, Sleepy, that the White Sox are using to evaluate these players? Because we know on the surface, if you look at their slash lines, like these guys should have been up a long time ago. But is it about timeline? Do you believe in the fact that moving a guy up too soon will stunt development in certain players?
I mean, I could definitely see how it can. I mean, if we want to go back to some nightmare fuel, like the way that they handled Courtney Hawkins was just awful and rushed him up way too aggressively before he showed he was ready. I think they've definitely taken steps back from that, but like maybe this is part of, like, I know even at the major league level, like this is kind of like they're finally getting buy-in from some of the hitters on like the pregame preparation type deal. So maybe this is part of like, maybe they're finally instituting like a top-down approach of like, on top of X metrics that we want you to be hitting before promotion, you need to prove and show and demonstrate that you are taking in this information. And again, not everybody learns in the same manner. So you can't really hold each person to like a strict, to the same guidelines. Because, I know, James, you're a teacher, correct? Like not everybody learns the same way. Like people have different methods. So like you can have an outline or like an instruction. This is how we want you to do it. And how each person, maybe you have to tweak, your method or whatnot for each prospect, each player. But like maybe this is me trying to be optimistic with how prospects are developing, because we've seen some lower level hitting prospects have success and get moved up and continue that success in recent years. So maybe with the new staff, maybe this is kind of the trickle down. We want you guys to do this on top of the metrics, on top of stats. And once you're hitting X, Y, Z, then you're ready. Because, I mean, even like you said, like Tim Elko should have been in Winston. Terrell Tatum should have been in Birmingham. Like, Jacob Burke probably should have been in Winston. Like each of these guys should have been promoted like a month ago, if not sooner. So I think, playing it cautious while annoying to a point isn't the worst method if these guys are demonstrating like the ability to whatever metrics they're using to evaluate them on in the pregame prep or routine, as they like to keep emphasizing with Oscar Colas. Like if they're doing all that and it's taking a little bit longer than we'd like, but they get to that next level and they're demonstrating success right away, or sustaining success that they had from level to level, okay, I think it's a bit easier to swallow, at least for me at that point, saying like, all right, these guys seem ready, get up and go. Kind of like, with the West Cap, even like West Cap would be like, to me,
that's a good example. Yeah,
an example. Probably could have went back to Canny and just kind of worked on it a bit more, but they put him and still kind of doing the same things. So I think that's passive, but
all right, I'm gonna take Sleepy away here. I'm gonna pause his mic and I'm gonna remove him from the stream. We appreciate Sleepy's contribution. That was I appreciate you, Sleepy. Sorry, you had some connectivity issues. James, you still got me?
I'm good.
I want you to explain to the listeners something that caught my attention earlier in the conversation. But to Sleepy's point, I think it is case by case basis. Sustained success. I think a cautious approach is safe. It's a safer way of developing prospects. And I just wonder what exactly does stunt development if they're overwhelmed. Like, for example, like you can't say that Tim Elko needs to work on slugging when his walk and swing and miss rate is too dramatic, right? Like that doesn't relate to what Brian Ramos is working on necessarily. So yeah, it's case by case basis. But here's something that I want to know is in the minor leagues, what they're working on. Everybody on the same page? I think it's early when it comes to the new coaching staff at the big league level. How much are they working with the front office and understanding what's happening in the minor leagues and what the processes and some of these key guys that they anticipate to be part of their future. And also when it comes to the front office, James, like I think you explain it better than anybody, is the way it operates. It's how can Rick Hahn fall on the sword so many times? Like, when Rick Hahn speaks to the media, are those Rick Hahn's thoughts? Is it like 5 other people's thoughts? Is it his decision when it comes to making these player acquisitions, or you know what I mean? I just feel like it's hard to justify making a change in title, because if the current construct is still there and you just move on from Rick Hahn, what exactly is happening in this organization?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like, look, if you had Chris Getz or somebody else, like, would they spend the money under the spending restrictions differently? Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's probably the difference, right? I think the difference is that like Rick Hahn probably never belonged like in the role that he's in right now as GM is my guess. Like I think like if Rick Hahn is your president of baseball operations, like making, not that I want that. Like I don't want some promotion for Rick Hahn, but I'm just saying like a role where he's like a decision maker that's relying on a huge team of scouts and R&D people and analytics staff and stuff like that. Like maybe you could get by with it. But the problem is like you have Rick Hahn at GM making all these decisions with the tiniest, pro scouting staff in the league, with the smallest analytics department, with a small R&D staff. Like it's just pretty rough. And it's, kind of what Josh Nelson was saying on our last podcast. They just don't have enough employees. And it's a huge problem. And yeah, like Rick Hahn goes and he takes the arrows, and like I don't think anybody feels bad for him at this point, and nobody should. But it's like my whole point when you talk about like getting rid of Rick Hahn. I'm like, okay, and who else, right? Because look, I think all of us would gladly accept any sort of change at this point. I would just like to think that change would be more broad, like with a president of baseball operations that could come in here and do this. And obviously, like this will be the second time I've referenced the Bulls, right? And I don't know if Arturas Karnisovas is the right person, but Jerry Reinsdorf let Michael lead a search for a person, and he hired a person that was like highly respected within that industry, right? And so, like, is that possible? I don't know. I lean no with Jerry being 87. So we'll see. But I do understand why it's disheartening. And all I have to do is like look in my Twitter mentions anytime I tweet anything that, is basically saying like, why should we care anyway if it's Rick Hahn and Ken Williams like making these trades and then like putting together next year's team. Like, look, guys, I get it. Like, I'm just saying, like, you're not going to have somebody in place by August 2nd to make these trades that isn't Rick Hahn and Ken Williams. And I just like kind of think you're doing the organization a disservice by holding or buying. God, they better not buy anything. So, I just think this is kind of where we are right now. Like did you want to get to anything else? I mean, there's a couple of comments. Clutch hat trick. You've had a bunch here. What about Tatum? I think we both kind of like Terrell Tatum. I can't sit here and pretend like he was a guy that I thought was going to like make some big jump this year, because I didn't know. 50 games last year for PEDs. I mean, he was decent, right? But he missed time. Baseball America had him at the back end of their list, so that piqued my interest a little bit. But I mean, he's a top 15 prospect in the system right now. He can play center. He's probably not going to play center for the White Sox. I think he homered again tonight, but I mean, he's a real guy. Getting him in the 16th round is it's pretty nice work, for the mostly the area scout. Like we can't even really give Mike Shirley and anybody else credit for that one. That's round 16 or whatever it was is an area scout pick. And then, just like kind of going through some of these other questions, Mike, I don't know how much Garrett Crochet you want to do on this, like the end of this live show here, but we can get into it a little bit if you want.
Yeah, I thought I was really looking forward to the potential of him being an opener, because maybe that suggests that he could get into the routine of developing into a starter, and you could live develop this player while competing, in air quotes, right? For the next season. I don't know what the plan is for Crochet. It is what it is at this point. I think when we first started covering the draft and here at FutureSox, and when they did select Garrett Crochet, I think the anticipation from all of us, and we heard from Mike Shirley, was that he would develop into a starting pitcher. So we've been waiting at FutureSox for him to develop into a starting pitcher, or at least have an opportunity to do it. But then the Tommy John surgery really did suck the life out of a lot of that, because not only are you missing that season due to recovery, but how many seasons is it going to take for you to build up your body, your repertoire, your arm strength to be a starter and get into that routine? So I thought at this point now would
Yeah.
be a great time for it. So maybe now, and if you do want to send him to Charlotte and have him start, do it now.
Well, so he's in Charlotte right now, and right, but Grifol kind of said that when he comes back, they want innings out of him. So I do think they're going to try to stretch him out a little bit. I don't know that he's going to get any starts. I think Ian, I saw earlier, mentioned, just his thoughts that he doesn't think he should be going to Charlotte. And like, look, I would keep him in the minors longer too, and just build up an innings base. I wonder how much that has to do with, like, is Charlotte at home right now, Mike? I didn't look. I know Birmingham's on the road if they got walked off. So that could be as simple as like they just want him around White Sox instructors, so they'd rather have him wherever like the home affiliate is, essentially, because he was in Birmingham and then it got transferred to Charlotte. I don't know that that's necessarily like, okay. So I don't know that that's necessarily, maybe they just like didn't want him going on the road with Birmingham and they'd prefer him in Charlotte because Zaleski and Veal are both there. I don't know that. That's just my speculation, but yeah, so we'll see. Like when he comes back up, like talking about a multi-inning role is nice, right? But if he gets in trouble in the first inning and you have to yank him, then it's not multiple innings and there's no way to like get those innings, right? So I don't really know. I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be terribly surprised if he's in the rotation next year in some capacity. Now he's going to need a piggyback or something, right? Because he's like not going to be pitching every fifth day for a contending White Sox team, but I don't know if we're going to have a contending White Sox team. So couple other things over here. Yeah, Ian Everett Tieford off to Auburn as pitching coach. From my understanding, it's nothing where, he was like dying to leave or anything like that. But I did hear that like Everett Tieford has like he has a young family. I think he'd like to be stationed, in the South. He's probably on campus in Auburn, like instead of like in the roving role that he was in. The thing that I find the most interesting though now is like, do you just ask Matt Zaleski to be your rover, or do you go outside the organization for a pitching person? Because while I think Everett Tieford was pretty highly respected, like on the data side, like the White Sox haven't exactly been churning out like, big league caliber starters, right? So it is like a good pivot spot if you want to like go poach somebody from somewhere. But I will say, like, these positions don't pay very much, as you've seen, Justin Wexler, just an area scout, right? But kind of an important one. He's off to be the pitching coach at Ball State. So I think, and Mike would know better than me. I think college coaches are making more than they ever have. They're pretty good gigs right now. So, if you're in a tough job in player development for a big league team, I don't know that like a college coaching position isn't better right now.
Yeah, and I think it just simplifies everything, lifestyle, and yeah, the money is wonderful. I mean, you saw it. I think it caught us all off guard when we saw the news of the Twins pitching coach get offered a job in college and he left. That's crazy, going from major league pitching coach to chilling out at a college university. Lower stress and all that. So that's a point well taken. I do want to address a couple of other things too, as well. And you're right, Ian. I know Charlotte is not the place for pitchers to work on their game because hitters have the advantage, right? The ball just flies out of that ballpark. I'm just saying it because there's no risk to it, right? Who cares if he gets hit? I just want him to develop that routine so when he gets to the big leagues, he's set to go. And that's related to Garrett Crochet. We were talking about him projecting to be potentially a starter. Also, Vince, I hear you, man. I hear you. Related to the rebuild and the beginning, because I feel like leading up to it, everything was done well. Everything was done right, in my opinion. I understood the vision, right? And the fact that their scouts were so committed to signing guys from the international classes. That's great, because we see the talent in Luis Robert, and you identify guys in Michael Kopech and Yoan Moncada at the time who were two of the top prospects in Major League Baseball. It does have a lot to do with development within the White Sox organization. I think that's something. It all has to do with the individual as well. But when it comes to the rebuild, I like to describe it as you had it, and then you hired Tony La Russa, and then it started sinking, right? There was a leak, there was a puncture hole somewhere, and it all started going downward because I feel like the decision-making process did alter because of the man at the helm in the dugout. And I hate to place so much blame on one individual. I just can't get over it, because if you hire anybody else, maybe that person's in more communication with the front office and understanding what is actually happening with the roster. Man, Tony La Russa didn't even know who some of these players were on the 40-man, and that's your manager that you're just bringing on. So, stuff like that, and we don't have to get too much in depth about that, even though we kind of already broke the seal there. But it all comes back to that decision and the undermining of the front office decision-making process of Rick Hahn from the front office. So it's like, you take that away from Rick Hahn, the guy who led you to that position, and you're not allowing him to make decisions essentially like he had been in the past. Dysfunction. It's total dysfunction. And then missing on talent when it's like, we're going to sign these guys, we're going to commit to these guys long term, and got to stay healthy because we don't have a farm system. We graduated a lot of the prospects that we acquired and drafted, and we rushed guys because this is our window. So yes, Vince, I feel you, man. I feel you. We are doing a live show. This is sort of why we're here. We're doing a live show on Sunday for the draft. We're going to be reacting to all the picks. Josh is busy having fun on his wedding and celebrating new marriage. So, that's awesome. And he allowed us to take over the Sox Machine YouTube for this example of what we're trying to do on Sunday. And we'll be there again, right here in this same spot. We're going to promote it on Twitter. We'll be on YouTube as well. And we hope that you can join us. So this was kind of just like a run through, just a rough draft. Really appreciate everybody.
A dry run, maybe? Yeah, I
sure.
think that's what they call it, I guess. Yeah.
It took me 20 minutes to figure out how to get our faces up on the screen, so we won't have to deal with that next time.
Yeah, so we're hoping to get some guests, that can hop on and kind of talk about their teams. So, it's not just us talking the whole time. I'm a YouTube TV guy, so I'll have the ESPN feed on, and Mike maybe we'll have MLB Network. I don't really know, but so yeah, and then we'll just kind of do it like we did last year, pick by pick. I'll have thoughts on all of the picks, but we'll go through the White Sox and then maybe a few more after that because we'll spend some time talking about their pick, obviously. So.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to some of the insight that we get from the experts that we'll have on, some draft experts, probably early on in the show. I think the plan for our live show is to react to the previous 14 picks prior to the White Sox pick at 15. So we'll react to all those picks and then have sort of like a follow of following 16, 17, 18, 19. Who knows how long we'll go, but we'll be here for you. So it'll be a lot of fun. Ian, appreciate you being here, man. We should have just had you on this show because you're all over it. We know you're the most dedicated Sox fan, so we appreciate you.
Yeah, and we went to pick 26 last year, plus a couple because, we were all so shocked by the Noah Schultz move that I feel like we stayed on until pick 29 or 30 or so talking about it. So this is only 15. It'll come pretty quickly for the most part. So. I'm looking forward to it. I wish I had, more information. I mean, obviously, like I put out a big piece as to what I'm hearing, but I mean, picking 15 in this draft is weird. I just want to reiterate because like the White Sox could come into this with a plan that obviously I'm not privy to. I've heard some things. And then it gets out of whack when somebody's on the board that you weren't expecting to be on the board. But then obviously in the baseball draft, like that could kind of mess with your plans for, successive rounds. So then you might have to like pivot and do something different. So, just like a few of the guys that were mentioned, I think were the same ones that we've kind of been talking about. We have profiles on the website, and then we'll go pick by pick and kind of outline who's going where. So it should be fun. I kind of like that event very much. So
yeah, I think that kind of is. Putting it lightly, Ian, 15 is a wait and see position. You're absolutely right. That is something that makes it fun for us this year because we have a few names that we believe, might land there, and so we'll find out. Also, before we leave, I want to mention August 26th. Everybody in this live stream, I want to see you at Guaranteed Rate Field. If you go to our Twitter at FutureSox, you'll see at the top it's posted. We're having a FutureSox night. We're just getting together with a bunch of Sox fans. It's $100. So you pay for the patio section. It's all you can eat for 90 minutes. Those who've been there before, I know you know the process there, but it's really cool. You can eat whatever they serve and drink as much beer as you want, or soda or water, whatever you want, 90 minutes prior to game time. And then we're hanging out in right field and we're watching the game. So August 26th, mark it on your calendar. We want to see you, and hopefully we can hang out and meet you in person. That'd be a lot of fun. James, thanks for being here. Sleepy, also for stopping by. This was a successful run through, and I want to do more of these in the future because this is fun. I like interacting with the listeners, so this was a good time, guys. I'm going to do one of these. I'm going to put a banner up. I'm going to watch this. Hang on, 1 second. We're going to do this right there. And we're going to end the stream here. So everybody, thank you for being a part of this. Appreciate you can go back and listen to this on the YouTube feed. So if you missed anything, you want to piece through it, that's cool. Otherwise, appreciate you guys. We'll talk to you Sunday for the draft. Be ready, 6 p.m. Central Time. We'll be here. Thanks, guys. Have a great night.